Here we are. Welcome back. It is time for an exciting and valuable talk with an entrepreneur out in California. In the beginning of this show, for all of my loyal listeners, we were in California quite a bit, but it's been some time, so I'm glad to bring Spencer on, who combines nearly 15 years in an esteemed Silicon Valley tech career with what he refers to as his dark decade, where the family business imploded, his brother lost his battle with cancer, and Spencer remained the sole source of income for his household. The 100-hour work weeks that followed confirmed for him that he needed to find another way, especially if he wanted any chance at spending quality time with his own kids. The lay of the investing land and how to insulate yourself from financial hardship. That last one is very, very important, especially as we just battled COVID in those uncertain times. Welcome back to That Entrepreneur Show. I am your host, Vincent A. Lancey, and you can find more about me on social media or YouTube at Vincent A. Lancey or my website, vincentalancey.com. I gave you a great intro. Get excited because now we're going to find out how he podcasts. Spencer, which platform do you stream your shows through?
Now I'm a Spotify guy. Used to be an Apple guy, but they're both great.
I have to ask, what made you do the jump?
Because I'm in Spotify so much already. I'm in there already with the music, and I was sitting there going, "Oh, there actually is a podcast side to this thing." And I'm a pretty big music dude from back in the day. Used to play in a lot of bands, and so I'm already streaming music. It was a natural fit.
That's another great lesson to everyone listening on. If you do produce your own show of any form, make sure to blast it on all channels, all platforms, because you don't know what the user is going to have downloaded. He has Spotify. I use Apple. My earlier interview today used Stitcher, so you have to be everywhere. When in the day do you find yourself listening to shows?
Yeah, I actually linked my podcast diet, if you want to call it that, to my running habit a few years ago. So I actually try to go and get, I'm not an impressive runner by any means, but I try to jog or run a few times a week. So when I run and jog, I digest podcasts, and it's just a wonderful way to combine the two of them. And particularly because when it's dense and it's really interesting stuff that I find fascinating, your blood's flowing and great ideas come from that. And learning is stronger for me in that context.
I can definitely relate with you. In the gym, I always get these great ideas, and I try not to be on my phone when I'm exercising, but I take out the notes on my phone and I'd be sure to jot it down. That is a great point. You learned how he podcasts. I'd love to hear how you do too. Email me info@vincentalancey.com, and I will feature you on a show. If it is your first time joining us, each week since December 2019, I have interviewed the founder of a company or brand to share what worked for them, what they needed to improve on, and all of their learning lessons along the way right here on this show. There are also some bonus episodes for you to enjoy where I bring back previous guests who are making big headlines. You never know which motivational journey will inspire you most. And today's guest is the co-founder of Madison Investing. Spencer understands that busy professionals want to truly provide for their families and wants to help you learn some of the basics and fundamentals in the investing land and how to avoid finding yourself in financial hardship. Now, the principles he has developed echo loudly in everything Madison Investing does, and the joy he finds in helping folks make financial choices that allow them to focus on what really matters is unparalleled. We're going to learn another side to this, where to date, he has partnered on deals totaling 6,000 plus units for more than 800 million worth of transactions across multifamily, self-storage, and other niche asset classes. This guy's a hustler. If you can't tell by now, we're going to learn how he does it. Spencer Hilligas. Spencer, thank you for joining the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fired up about the discussion. I mean, entrepreneurship is like the most fun topic we could dig into here, Vincent. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate your passion because I know that's going to add a lot of value to our audience. Would you mind introducing yourself a bit more to our listeners, and then we'll dive more into business talk?
Yeah, happy to. So I'm actually based out here in Silicon Valley, California, a little place called Alameda. It's an island between Oakland and San Francisco. Grew up in the Bay Area originally, spent some time out in, outside of California. So for those outside of Cali, who usually think, oh, those Californians, they're so delusional, probably pretty true. I actually got out for a good decade, lived in Colorado and, moved around a bit. All that to say though, I grew up in a real estate household. My dad was a broker, residential broker for 30 years. And it's worth mentioning because that was my exposure to entrepreneurship at a young age. So I was, technically, I think working for him at the ripe old age of like 6, if that counts. I was also doing open houses and all that stuff. Ultimately, though, not very cool to tell your friends you work in a real estate company in Silicon Valley. Most folks think that tech companies are quite a bit cooler.
Yeah.
So after school, that's the way I went. Did not expect that to be, a 15-year journey. So across 5 software companies, all of which are fintech or financial tech companies. So that was a heck of a learning journey, man. And I'm very, very thankful for it, but it was also really hard at times. And so ran that journey. And then over the last stretch, I somehow found my way toward a different path, the entrepreneurship path. I can always go in more into that, perhaps we will today, but it was really a labor of love on nights and weekends, in addition to a full-time leadership day job in the corporate world. And back in 2019, finally pulled the ripcord, decided to go and do it full-time, even though we've been building it for a few years. And so now full-time, I run Madison Investing, and we help folks invest in, private real estate deals and other niche asset classes. And it's just a blast. It really is, because so many folks that were in my shoes, Vincent, and they still are probably a thriving, corporate career, if you want to call it that. And they think that they're on this path to, a happy path, if you want to call it that, to where they can retire and have everything they want, but they're going to be working until they are 65 or 70, and their net worth is not going where they want it to go. So now we get to help folks actually kind of bridge that gap. And it's really a joy every day.
I can resonate with a lot you're saying. My last job in finance in the corporate world, I had this very big moment where there was a 30-year veteran in the office, a guy who's been in this office a long time, right about to retire. And we had this conversation at the coffee area, and he said, Vin, the last 30 years, I've got this stocks, this money, this, that, but all my memories are right here, and points over to his desk area. And that really sunk in big with me, because I always had one foot in and out the door with this entrepreneurship thing. I had to provide for myself as a finance guy. I didn't want to let that side go. Then I was doing real estate, financial advising, trying to write my first book. Eventually, like you just said, pull the Band-Aid off. I had to just go right in there, get the first book done, leave the nice salary in finance to working 3 jobs. I was teaching English 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. online to kids in Beijing. And then after that, I would be like a labor helper. And then I would do some kitchen work as an expo at a restaurant, just to make less money than I would at the last job. But to make your dreams come true in the entrepreneurial world, sometimes there are some sacrifices, and I'm sure we'll hear about yours throughout the show. You told us when you got into entrepreneurship. You did the 15 years in these great companies, but you realized you wanted something more. Let's talk more about that.
Yeah. I think there was a spark moment, and it took me, frankly, a lot of conversations with folks after I had launched our business to even kind of reflect back and realize, like, when did I actually care enough, or like what was the catalyst moment to kind of wake me up from just walking the path of working full-time, dumping money into our 401k, typical traditional investments, which are still worthwhile things to look at, of course, but they don't really grow your net worth, and I look back at, this is a couple companies ago when I was still in the corporate W-2 career, and I was at a unicorn company, worth over $1 billion. This is the cool way to say that. And I was putting in those 80 to 100 hour work weeks. And at the time, I have 2 young kids now. They're a little bit older, but at the time, my first one was an infant, and I was putting in those hours, and I was not able to see my infant son for like 2 weeks, because by the time I'd come home, he was asleep, and I'd leave so early in the morning, I didn't really get to see him. And around that time, I thought, is this really going to work? Is this going to be the path that makes sense for us and for our family for the next 20, 30 years? Yeah, because I didn't see an off ramp or whatever you want to call, the exit hatch, whatever metaphor you want to use for their corporate career. And so that was the spark. I didn't really make a connection until a couple of years later, right, when I realized, I kind of stumbled my way into a real estate tech company. And it was actually because like a mentor guided me there. And on nights and weekends, I started kind of voraciously, almost obsessively, like studying this stuff, because I was seeing how successful the folks we were helping, like, this was a company tailored toward investors. It was called Lending Home. And we were like helping real estate fix and flippers fund their deals. And so I was inside this company, seeing how well those investors were doing. And I'm sitting there going, wow, that's a lot of zeros. And I'm sitting there going, like, I don't necessarily want to become a flipper. I can't swing a hammer whatsoever, Vincent. Like I am hopeless on that. I use YouTube to fix some stuff around our house sometimes, but beyond that, I really got the bug. And, I devoured over 400 podcasts in the scope of probably the first 18 months. I read over 24 books on nights and weekends. I was really, really looking deep into, like, how am I going to go and start building other income streams for our family? And that's when we started doing a couple of things that in hindsight, maybe would have done a little differently. So we invested in buying some small rentals. We bought like a duplex. We bought some single family home rentals. These are all real estate investments, like in the other part of the country. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't quite moving the needle fast enough for us. And it was quite a bit more work, I think, during my corporate job than I expected.
Yep.
But ultimately we were just like, something's got to change. And ultimately we found like a different strategy. And it worked so well for us that we started going, we could probably build a business around this, because so many folks in my own network wanted to know what we were doing. But it was a true labor of love. Like, I was waking up at 4 a.m., very similar timetable to you, Vincent. On that one side hustle you were mentioning, where I was up at 4, I was doing 2 hours of work at least on every single day before I would go in and lead a team at my day job. And so I think from that first moment, working inside that one company, it was a catalyst for me, and I cannot believe it went all the way through it to the way it did now. At the intro, you did mention, as a side note, that there was like a kind of a dark decade that happened earlier in my family, in my life.
Yes.
And I just want to clarify that for folks too, because it was an interesting time. It was a flashback a bit to when I was in my 20s. And I did lose my younger brother to a type of cancer, and it was a long time ago. But at that moment, the ramifications were severe to watch my family's household, like my dad, go through that, because there was just a domino effect, and his business really crumbled because of the many ramifications of that one income stream household. And it sent a shockwave through in such incredible ways. There's a lot of downsizing that went into their lifestyle. And I'm sitting there going, man, that one active form of income that he had going in his business is a similar structure to the one that we have now for our family. Mm-hmm. And but to be clear, like Jennifer, my very capable and amazing, co-founder, who's also my wife, she had her own career as well, but we were tied to the job. And our family's livelihood was tied to the job. And I saw an opportunity there to do something about that, but I didn't know what the path was at first. In typical entrepreneurship fashion, it was like, I can see, call it true north on the compass, if you will, and I don't really know what it means yet, though. Like I don't know what is the correct exact strategy. I don't know what the right tactics are as a result of that, but it was the right catalyst time because of all those sequencing of events. So hopefully I didn't go too nerdy on that one.
No, you gave a great one. And a lot of learning lessons in that answer, especially where you talked about your learning lessons. Sometimes we think it's the good move, the right move, the move. In your case, buying duplexes, all these things, like that's going to be your thing right there. But then you saw the opportunity, and you saw an opportunity to exit a situation where you mentioned your family's livelihoods were attached to these companies. And we just went through a pandemic. Anything could happen. You also mentioned having multiple streams of income. That's extremely important for me. I think last month there was like 11 different streams, which is amazing. And the books and the podcast sponsorship, just different checks coming in, my side jobs, everything's got to keep coming in, because when one goes down, you don't want your whole world to crumble. And unfortunately that can happen. You mentioned you've been on this journey with your wife, which is amazing. What are two of the hardest parts of running your own business opposed to your leadership position in corporate?
I would say it sounds simple, but as you can very much appreciate, arguably even more than I can, for sure, Vincent, because you have so many different businesses that you've launched, and I'm just very proud of our one. But I would say focus is number one, and prioritization number two, and not necessarily in that order. Those sound so simple, right? But I think that the focus element, it is immensely challenging, I think, for many entrepreneurs, because of the fact that the very nature of an entrepreneur is typically one of like ideas. It
Yep.
starts with
Yep.
ideas,
Yep.
and ideas, enthusiasm, passion. And when those ideas come up, you have to be able to filter, iterate, test, and then decide what's on the chopping block. And I think that my hope would be over time, I am much more adept at knowing how early and how quick, how severely I need to chop an idea.
Yeah.
Because so often, I see folks that I care about in my network too. Good on them. They launch a new product line for their business, and they might even have a thriving primary revenue stream for that business. And they say, "Oh, but I can't believe that the opportunity is huge. We also have to launch this other branch, this other revenue stream for our business." And then they burn 6 months, 12 months, and a ton of capital to go and attempt to launch that, and the primary suffers. And so focus is number one, prioritization number two.
Can't agree with you more. It's maybe the hardest. Every single day, there's a million things to do. When you own your own company, you have to do everything. If you own a position at a company, it may be very time intensive, and there may be a lot going on, like your role was, but it's just one part of it. So when different things come up, as he's mentioning, finding that part of your brain to correctly place it underneath or on top of something else you have going on, that type of bucket list can go on forever. I'm sure you can relate.
Very much so. And I think focus and prioritization being the second one called out here.
Yeah.
To clarify, I think that it's some folks kind of put them together, and frankly, I think it deserves its own category, because prioritization is one where, let's assume, we find the goal that we're going to go aim for, and we might even translate that to a financial plan. So you got the vision, you got the goal. You say in 12, 24, 60 months, whatever the goal timeline would be, you need to go hit it. Now it comes down to not only what are you going to do, it's what you're not going to do. Even more importantly, it's what you're not going to do. And because you have to pick what you're going to work on. Pick a massively successful entrepreneur from the top 5 list, and every single one of them has the same 24 hours in a day. The difference is that they're able to say no a lot better and more consistently than we are. They probably have some advantages as well, but they've built many of those advantages themselves by choice and by conviction. So
you keep referring to it. It really just lessons learned. You have to go through it, and then you learn from it, and you keep going. You all have the same 24 hours in a day. You get, like you said, you've gotten better at knowing what to chop off the block. That just comes through working hard and learning from yourself, fixing it, doing it again. If you could look back over your course of doing your own thing here with Madison Investing, what would you say one of your greatest failures or lessons learned is here?
Yeah, I would say the first 18 months that I was building our business on, mornings and nights and weekends, and I was effectively helping, at first colleagues, and then eventually total strangers that find our business to invest in, syndications and funds and all these things. The biggest challenge was at first, I wish I could go back and put even more into it, frankly, because the early velocity is so key. And I look at the trajectory or the arc of our growth. Like, we're so blessed now to be growing at the way we are, primarily from referrals and word of mouth from happy investors. But beyond that, early on, I treated it more as a hobby in the first 12 months. And it wasn't because I wasn't interested. It was because I hadn't really seen what the outcome and potential of the business could be. And I wasn't necessarily an entrepreneur beside the stuff I'd worked inside of multiple other entrepreneurs' businesses and rallied behind their vision and cause, not just my dad's, but 5 other companies. And so I didn't realize necessarily how much that early velocity can change the entire trajectory of the business. So I wish I had gone from hobbyist to, full conviction, significantly more hours, even doing what I had to do on the weekends during that first 12 months.
Sometimes you need a push in the right direction to really see one small accomplishment, because that gets the ball rolling and it keeps things going. When you're not seeing any gains, you're not seeing anything for all of your hard work, it can get discouraging. But just please, everyone listening on, keep going, because eventually something will go your way. I'm nowhere where I need to be. I'm nowhere where I want to be. I have a lot more work to do. But like you said, I've started a few things. Just to clarify myself, I only started one company, but I've started a ton of different businesses within that company, with the podcast, the books, all of those different things. Find ways to grow your business model under that big umbrella. We're going to find ways to continue to learn from today's guest now, because we're going to ask him who he would sit down and learn from if he had the chance to pick up any entrepreneur and have a conversation with?
Oh man, I feel like this is one of the trickiest questions for me because obviously you probably struggle with it too, Vincent. I think there's just so many to choose from. This is probably a pretty contrarian answer given folks that know me well, because I'm a very values driven guy, and I think this person I'm going to pick is a easy choice, but also one that could be perceived as that's misaligned potentially to my values. But I would say Bezos, man. Now I'll just say Bezos because the mindset appears that it appears to have had so early was relatively firmed up. You know, I mean, he really had a lot of the vision and a lot of the principles that at least he seems to still operate on now. But I would want to get in there and just talk to him even before any of that traction happened. You know, those early interviews with him are fascinating, like absolutely fascinating. And particularly when he was taking so much heat early in the formation of the, you know, just the prominence of the internet, and he was trying to launch this company. And so that would be it for me.
Well, now I'm going to delve a little deeper. Where would this meeting go down if you had the chance to pick it?
Oh my gosh. It would have to be a place that is quiet. You know, it doesn't have to be secluded necessarily, but I'm an introvert by default. That might not be clear for folks on here, but I prefer to have a deep conversation with one person, such as we're having right now, Vincent, as opposed to, you know, I've done the big speech thing, I've done the big speaking engagement thing, but I much prefer a quiet venue. So it's probably going to be like maybe a quiet cafe, one of the more off the grid ones, and like a couch in the back. You know, it would be relatively informal, would not be a formal business meeting by any means.
I like that. Being relaxed goes a long way when you're having a conversation. If you're tense, you're not in a situation that makes you feel comfortable, you're probably not going to be delivering the best conversation. Your mind's going to be elsewhere because you're not comfortable. I enjoy that answer. If you enjoyed this episode, it's about to get a whole lot better because we're going to have his take and his great perspective on the Spotlight story. If it's your first time with us, each week I share the journey of a fellow entrepreneur to inspire you, the listeners, because we have another analysis besides myself. Today, we're going to look into the journey of another all-star finance entrepreneur in John Stein. The Forbes article I caught describes Stein as a man on a mission to help you make better returns with your money, and he's the co-founder of the online investment advisor, Betterment. I learned this was one of the first fintech companies created and a startup company that launched in the height of the financial crisis back in 2008. From that to now bringing in $10 million in business on average per day. Everyone listening on, keep grinding. Look how far he came. From around 2003 to 2007, he was working as a consultant for First Manhattan Consulting Group and noticed that while well-intentioned, banks really weren't putting customers' needs and wants first. He wanted to change that. He spread the money he earned while working there into several brokerage accounts. Here's a quote. They were trying to direct me to do the things that might be best for them, but not the things that would be best for my long-term wealth. This is why I guess he diversified with 7 different accounts. He believed there should be financial advice that was accessible and aligned with the customer, but realized it wasn't going to happen with the system that was already in place. This is where Betterment was birthed. They offer a suite of financial products for individuals like the cash analysis tools, 401ks and IRAs, the two-way sweep to optimize checking, savings, and investment dollars, high-yield savings accounts, so much more. I want to end on this next piece I thought was relatable to many of you listening on, in that you set goals and strive for greatness. He received regulatory approval just one day before the event. Quote, one of the most exciting and terrifying days of my life. Remember staying up basically all night preparing my speech to give on stage, and I had like timestamps every time I edited my speech that night. It was like every 15 minutes all night long I was up making some edit to do or whatever. I really obsessed over it. I was pacing around all day before delivering it. I can imagine before an event when things may not go right, there's no certainty, there's still a lot up in the air. It drives your nerves. What's your takeaways here, Spencer? And I also see as it's a fintech company, maybe we'll have some advice from when your time at those companies.
Yeah, I mean, it's an awesome kind of origin story too, right? I mean, not just for the company, but for the leader behind it. Well, when I was reading about it, I mean, clearly the final point on that about the regulatory approval on the final day before is one that jumps off the page, and I really think that that is one that speaks to a lesson. It speaks to a lesson that resonates with me. I mean, the company Betterment is massive and really impressive and done a lot of awesome things. So I look up to that. In terms of regulatory approval, I mean, I know that you're a former finance guy as well, Vincent. I currently play in a heavily regulated space. I've worked in other heavily regulated spaces. And so whenever you're playing, whatever your jam, whatever your product, whatever your service you're building, always considering like, what are the big swings? Like what are the things that are out there that are risks, to your business, if you're doing like, call it a SWOT analysis or something.
Yeah. There we go.
There we go. A little corporate going on. Not to scare people away, but I'll just say that if you're doing like a SWOT analysis and trying to figure out what are the game enders for this business, like that you could put in all the amazing work. You could have the perfect product, the perfect service. People love it. And you're solving a problem that no other business in the space might be solving. Mm-hmm. So you've carved out a really nice corner of a market. But if one individual, like typically regulation or something about law can come in and just suddenly stop your business, that is absolutely terrifying. And I think that it's a real testament to conviction and follow up and frankly belief in that story that he knew that he was on the path. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just have to control the controllable and then see what the universe is going to give back to you, as corny as that might sound.
There are always external factors involved, no matter which business you're in, and there's nothing that's going to stop them, but you have to be able to react to them. If there's a regulatory change, you either sink or you swim. There's no other place for that. I got to thank you for your views on that, Spencer. That was great. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to sit with us today to talk about Madison Investing. I liked how you really shared how you had the courage to leave. You felt these jobs, although they were compensating you, there's family strains there. You had to do what's best, and you took the learning lessons that you learned from when you were just a kid, being in the office, soaking everything up, firsthand knowledge. As everybody knows listening on, a career academic, I'd be in school forever if it was free. There's nothing that can replace those firsthand situations, and that became what it seems second nature to him because of how young you were. I'd like to now ask you, Spence, for your last word.
I would just say that as I'm sitting on here and having the opportunity to speak with you, Vincent, that so many of the learnings that I take away from my corporate career are still easily translated to entrepreneurship. And I think that oftentimes, particularly now in COVID, I often find myself saying, last year when we had COVID, and it's like, oh yeah, we still have COVID. It just depends on what month. So many actual real conversations in the past week with parents and hardworking, very well compensated W-2 folks. They're in the struggle, man, and they still are now. And when they ask how do we go build what we built, and how do we actually go and do something similar, that is something I just encourage them to really place some belief behind themselves as to what they're capable of. Because if you had asked me 10 years ago in my corporate career, you think you're ever going to be starting your own business, I probably would have said, oh, I don't know if I'm ready for that.
Yeah.
And I'd say that is absolutely untrue. Anyone who has built a career in the corporate world can go out and build their own business. It's just a matter of bias toward action and willingness to fail.
A lot of people scared away from doing their own thing when they realize that failure is going to come way before success, and it's going to come knocking 1,000 times before that success knocks once. There are the outlier companies who hit it off big right away, of course, but for the majority of entrepreneurs, you're bootstrapping, as he shared with you throughout his whole beginning testimonial. Where can everybody find you, find Madison Investing?
Yeah, at our website. That's the best way to do it, at madisoninvesting.com. I'm also on social media front. I'm also on LinkedIn, so I'm a big LinkedIn guy. So feel free to reach out either way.
I appreciate you sharing that. Everyone, be sure to check out his services if you're in need, or if not, learn from his page. He has a lot to offer. And check us out too at That Entrepreneur Show on all social media except Twitter. We're at Podcasts by Lancey, so you have updates from all of my shows. I'm at Vincent A. Lancey on YouTube, all social media, or the website is vincentalancy.com. My latest book is Mental Health Week, the go-to book for elementary school students to improve their mental health. And of course, it is time for the quote to end the show. This one is from our Spotlight Entrepreneur, and it relates to getting started in entrepreneurship. John said the best piece of advice he received was just to make it real and do that as quickly as possible, whatever it takes. If it's just setting up your email accounts, if it's designing the beta for the one thing that you want to launch so you can put it in people's hands and they start to touch it, make it real, make it usable, make it something that investors, customers, etc., can start to interact with and give you feedback on as quick as possible. That's all for today on That Entrepreneur Show. We'll see you next week. Spencer, thank you for stopping by.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vincent. This was a blast.